I am Joshua, 32 years old, and the night I lost the only home I had ever known, I was holding a cardboard box that contained my entire life. My parents had been buried for exactly 6 hours. Hunter, her boyfriend of 3 months, a guy who wore sunglasses indoors and called me Sport. Hunter. I gripped the cardboard box tighter. My knuckles were white. Inside the box were just the basics. My laptop, a few changes of clothes, a framed photo of mom and dad, and the old chess set dad and I used to play on. You're kicking your brother out for a guy you barely know? She took a sip of wine, her eyes drifting over my shoulder, looking at the driveway, at the street, anywhere but at me. It's my house, Joshua. The deed is being transferred. The lawyer made that very clear today. House, liquid assets, full beneficiary. That's me. I know what the summary said, I argued, trying to keep the panic out of my chest. But mom and dad wouldn't want this. They wouldn't want me on the street. She laughed then. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a brittle, sharp sound like glass breaking. Mom and dad aren't here, are they? They're gone. And frankly, you've been leeching off them for long enough. Leeching? I felt a flash of heat in my face. I had lived here for the last 3 years, yes. But I wasn't leeching. I was the one who drove dad to chemotherapy 3 times a week. I was the one who managed the household accounts when mom's eyesight started to go. I was the one who sat up at 3 a.m. when dad was confused and scared, holding his hand while Sarah was away in the city, living her best life, and posting about it on Instagram. I took care of them, I said, my voice trembling. I was the one who was here, Sarah, every single day. She finally looked at me, really looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't anger. It was worse. It was total indifference. You did what you were good at, Joshua, she said. You're a helper, a background character, but the show is over. I don't need a bookkeeper. I don't need a nurse. And I certainly don't need a brother hanging around reminding me of illness and death. She stepped back and started to close the heavy oak door. Wait! I stepped forward, putting a foot on the threshold. Sarah, seriously, it's freezing. I have $60 in my checking account until the stipend clears next week. Where am I supposed to go? She stopped. She looked down at my foot blocking her door, then up at my face. She sneered. It was an ugly expression on such a beautiful face. Find somewhere else to die, she said. The words hung in the air like smoke. What? I whispered. You're just like them, she said, gesturing vaguely behind her into the dark house. Old energy. Sadness. You're useless now, Joshua. Go find a shelter. Go find a friend. I don't care. Just get off my property. She kicked my foot. Not hard, but enough to shock me. I pulled back instinctively. Slam. The sound of the door closing was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Then came the sound of the deadbolt sliding home. Click. Then the top lock. Click. I stood there for a full minute. I could smell the lemon polish seeping out from the cracks of the door. It was the smell of my childhood. The smell of safety. Now it was the smell of exclusion. I turned around and looked at the yard. The weeping willow tree dad planted when I was born was swaying in the wind. The flower beds mom tended were covered in frost. Everything looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, but the world had completely shifted on its axis. I walked down the steps, my legs feeling like lead. I walked to my car, a 10-year-old Toyota Camry with a dent in the rear bumper. I opened the trunk and threw the box in. It landed with a hollow thud. I got into the driver's seat and just sat there. I didn't start the engine. I stared at the house. I saw the lights go on in the living room. I saw a shadow move across the window. Then I saw another shadow join it. Hunter. He was there already. They were probably toasting, probably celebrating. Sarah had just inherited a $28 million estate, a portfolio of stocks, and this house. She had won the lottery of birth, and I was the loose end she had just snipped off. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hoping against hope that maybe she had changed her mind. Maybe it was a text saying, I'm sorry, come back inside, I'm just grieving. It wasn't Sarah. It was a notification from my bank app. Alert. Secondary card ending in 4590 has been deactivated by the primary account holder. She hadn't just kicked me out. She had cut me off. The credit card I used for groceries, for gas, for Dad's pharmacy runs, it was gone. She must have called the bank the second the funeral ended. She was efficient, I'll give her that. I hit the steering wheel. Once, twice. Then I screamed. A raw, guttural scream that scraped my throat. I screamed for the unfairness of it. I screamed for my parents who were cold in the ground. I screamed because I was 32 years old and I was effectively homeless. But then the screaming stopped. A strange calm washed over me. It wasn't peace. It was something colder. Find somewhere else to die, she had said. You're useless now. I looked at the house one last time. I wiped my eyes. No, I said to the empty car. I'm not going to die. And I'm definitely not useless. I started the engine. The heater rattled to life. I backed out of the driveway, leaving the only home I had ever known behind me. I didn't know where I was going to sleep that night. I didn't know how I was going to pay for my next meal. But as I drove away, I remembered something. Something small. Something Sarah, in her arrogance, had probably forgotten. Dad didn't just teach me how to do the books. He taught me how to play chess. And he always told me, Joshua, never let the opponent see your real strategy until it's too late to stop it. Sarah thought the game was over because she had captured the king and queen. She didn't realize there were still pieces on the board. I drove toward the highway, the road blurring ahead of me. I had to survive tonight. Just tonight. Tomorrow the real game would begin. To understand why my sister could look me in the eye and tell me to go die, you have to understand the ecosystem we grew up in. Families are like small corporations, and in the business of the Reynolds family, Sarah was the CEO, and I was the intern in the basement. We weren't always enemies. That's the tragedy of it. As I drove aimlessly down the I-95, looking for a rest stop where I could park without getting towed, memories flooded back. I remembered the bunk beds. When we were little, before the money really started pouring in from Dad's investments, we shared a room. Sarah was 3 years older. She used to hang her head over the side of the top bunk and whisper stories to me until I fell asleep. She was the brave one. She was the one who chased away the monsters under the bed. I've got you, Josh, she used to say. Us against the world. But then came the teenage years. Then came the validation. Sarah blossomed into this incredible creature. Charismatic, beautiful, sharp-tongued. She was the captain of the debate team, the prom queen, the valedictorian. My parents, God rest their souls, they tried to be fair, but you could see it. You could see the way their eyes lit up when Sarah walked into a room. She was the golden child. I was reliable. I was Joshua. I got B+. I didn't make the varsity team. I liked numbers. I liked quiet. Dad was a titan of industry, a man who built a logistics empire from a single truck. He respected strength. He respected volume. Sarah had both. I had patience. You're a grinder, Josh, Dad told me once, teaching me how to read a balance sheet. The world needs grinders. But Sarah is a star. He didn't mean it to be cruel. He thought he was assessing our assets. But it planted a seed in Sarah's head. She matters more. Over the years, that seed grew into a forest of entitlement. By the time we were in our 20s, the dynamic was set. Sarah was the public face of the family foundation. She traveled to galas in Paris and London. She posted photos of herself cutting ribbons and hugging orphans. She was good at it, I won't lie. She could charm a check out of a stone. But behind the scenes, I was the one making sure the foundation's checks didn't bounce. I was the one dealing with the IRS audits. I was the one handling the messy reality that supported her glossy lifestyle. When Mom got sick first, Alzheimer's, the long goodbye, Sarah couldn't handle it. It's too depressing, she said. I can't see her like that. It affects my energy. So she stayed in her penthouse in the city. She visited once a month, bringing flowers, staying for 20 minutes to take a selfie with Mom, and then leaving. I moved home. I learned how to change bedsheets with a person still in them. I learned how to spoon-feed a woman who didn't recognize me. Then, when Dad got cancer 2 years later, it was a double shift. I remember one night about 6 months ago. Dad was weak, sitting in his armchair by the fire. Sarah had just left after a whirlwind visit where she spent the whole time talking about her new car. Dad looked at me. His eyes were tired, sunken. "She doesn't listen," Dad whispered. "She's busy, Dad." I defended her. I always defended her. "She's handling the donors. She hears what she wants to hear," Dad said. He reached out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. "She sees the prize, Joshua. She never sees the cost. You count the pennies. You know the cost." "I'm just the bookkeeper, Dad." I smiled sadly. "No," he said, intense and focused. "You're the safeguard." I didn't know what he meant then. I thought it was the morphine talking. Flash forward to the funeral today. It was a spectacle. Production. Sarah had hired an event planner. I'm not kidding. An event planner for our parents' funeral. There were hundreds of people. Business partners, politicians, socialites. Sarah stood at the front of the church, looking like a grieving angel. She gave a eulogy that had half the room in tears. She talked about legacy and love and inspiration. I sat in the front row, numb. I hadn't written a speech. Couldn't. I had said my goodbyes in the quiet moments, holding their hands as the monitors flatlined. My grief was a private, heavy stone in my gut. Hers was a balloon she released for the crowd to watch. After the service, at the wake, people lined up to offer condolences to her. "Oh, Sarah, you're so strong. Sarah, the foundation is in good hands with you. Sarah, your parents would be so proud." I stood by the buffet table, holding a glass of lukewarm water. A few people nodded at me, awkwardly. "Sorry for your loss, Justin?" One of Dad's old partners said to me. "Joshua," I corrected. "Right, Joshua. Tough break, kid." And he walked away to get a photo with Sarah. That was my life. The background noise. Then came the reading of the will summary. We gathered in the library, me, Sarah, and Robert, the family lawyer. Robert had been with my dad for 40 years. He was a stoic man, unreadable. He read the broad strokes. To my daughter, Sarah Reynolds, the family estate at 42 Oak Creek Lane, the entirety of the liquid assets, totaling approximately $28 million, full beneficiary rights to the lifestyle and maintenance. Sarah let out a breath she had been holding. She didn't cry. She smiled. A small, satisfied smile. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Don't worry, Josh," she whispered. "I'll take care of you. I promise. I'll take care of you." That lie lasted exactly 4 hours. From the moment Robert left the house, the transformation happened. Sarah started walking around the house touching things. "This furniture is hideous," she said, looking at Mom's favorite armchair. "Dump it. The staff. We need new staff. Younger ones. And this room," she stood in the doorway of Dad's study. "This will be a media room." "Sarah, stop," I had said. "They're barely in the ground." That was the trigger. That was when she turned on me. The golden child mask slipped, and underneath was just greed. Naked, ugly greed. She saw me not as a brother, but as an obstacle to her reinvention. She wanted a fresh start, a life of unencumbered luxury with her new boyfriend, Hunter. And I was the baggage. So she kicked me out. I parked my car in the back corner of a Walmart parking lot. I reclined the seat. It was 2 a.m. now. My stomach rumbled. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, but all I could see was Dad's face. "You're the safeguard." What did I safeguard? Nothing. I had failed. I had let her take the house. I had let her erase me. But then a thought nagged at me. Robert, the lawyer. When he was reading the summary, he had looked at me. Not at Sarah. At me. When Sarah was smiling about the millions, Robert had caught my eye and given a barely perceptible nod. And he had left a folder on the table. A thick folder. Sarah had grabbed the deed paperwork, but she had ignored the binder labeled Trust Protocol and Executive Instructions. I sat up in the car seat. The cold was seeping through the windows. Wait, I frantically looked around the car. The cardboard box. I had grabbed it in a hurry. I had thrown my laptop in, my photos. Did I grab the papers? I turned on the overhead light. I rummaged through the box. Clothes, charger, chess set. There, at the bottom of the box. A thick, leather-bound binder. I must have swept it off the hall table along with my keys when I was walking out the door. Pure instinct. It was the full copy of the will. Not the summary. The real thing. I opened it. The pages were dense, full of legal jargon. Testamentary trust. Irrevocable. Fiduciary duty. My eyes scanned the pages in the dim yellow light of the car. Sarah was right about one thing. The house was hers. The money was hers to enjoy. But then I saw a paragraph on page 42. A paragraph labeled, "The Morality Clause and Executor Authority." I started to read. And as I read, my breath caught in my throat. Sarah thought she had inherited a kingdom. She didn't realize she had actually inherited a prison. And she had no idea who held the keys. The sun comes up differently when you're homeless. It's not a beautiful sunrise. It's an interrogation light. It exposes how dirty your windshield is, how wrinkled your clothes are, and how desperate your situation has become. I woke up at 6 a.m. with a stiff neck and a bladder that felt like it was going to burst. A security guard was tapping on my window. "Move it along, pal. No overnight camping." "I'm leaving," I said, my voice hoarse. I started the car. The gas light dinged. Low fuel. Great. I drove to the nearest gas station. I had a few dollars in cash in my wallet, maybe $20. I put 10 in the tank and used the rest to buy a stale coffee and a bagel. I sat on the curb, eating the bagel, watching people commute to work. They had showers. They had beds. They had lives. I had a cardboard box and a binder I hadn't finished reading yet. I needed a base of operations. I couldn't plan a counterattack from a Walmart parking lot. I swallowed my pride and called Liam. Liam was my college roommate, a guy who works in IT and lives in a messy apartment about 20 minutes away. He's the opposite of my family. Chaotic, loud, broke half the time, but loyal as a dog. "Josh," he answered on the second ring. "It's 7 a.m. Did someone die?" "Wait, shoot. I'm sorry, man. I forgot." "It's okay, Liam. Listen, I need a favor. A big one." 40 minutes later, I was sitting on Liam's beat-up leather couch. The apartment smelled like pizza boxes and soldering irons. It was paradise. "She did what?" Liam was pacing the room, holding a half-eaten slice of pizza. "She kicked you out? On the day of the funeral? That's biblical, man. That's Cain and Abel stuff. Actually, it's worse. It's Cinderella stuff. She said I was useless," I said, staring at my hands. "She cut my cards, Liam. I'm zeroed out." Liam stopped pacing. He looked at me, dead serious. "Okay, you're staying here. Couch is yours as long as you need. I'll cover food. You figure this out. You're the smart one, Josh. You're the numbers guy. There's gotta be a mistake." "There's no mistake," I said. "She has the house. She has the money. But does she have a brain?" Liam tapped his temple. "Because from what I remember of your sister, she's great at spending money, but terrible at counting it." He was right, and that gave me a spark of hope. I opened the binder again. I needed to understand the enemy, or rather, the rules of the game the enemy was playing. But before I could dive in, my phone buzzed again. A text message. My heart skipped a beat. Was it Sarah? Apologizing. I looked at the screen. It was from Elena. Elena was Sarah's personal assistant. A quiet, terrifyingly organized woman who had been with the foundation for 2 years. She was nice enough, but she worshipped the ground Sarah walked on. Or so I thought. The text read, "Mr. Reynolds, confirmation. Sarah asked me to transfer the deposit for the Porsche 911 GT3 this morning. $50,000 wire initiated. Also, she wants to schedule a meeting with the architects to discuss the East Wing demolition. Just keeping you in the loop as requested." I stared at the phone. As requested? I hadn't requested anything. Then, A second text popped up immediately after. OMG. Joshua. I am so sorry. Wrong contact. Please delete that. I meant to send that to Hunter. Please don't tell Sarah. My brain started racing. First, Sarah was buying a Porsche, a $200,000 car, less than 24 hours after the funeral. Second, she was planning to demolish the east wing of the house. That was Dad's library. That was the heart of the home. Third, Elena was scared. I didn't reply to Elena. I realized something. Sarah was moving fast. Too fast. She was spending money she technically didn't have access to yet. Probate takes months. The banks don't just unlock the vaults the day after the funeral. Unless she was borrowing against the inheritance. Liam, I said, standing up, can I use your laptop? Sure. Password is Star Wars 123. I logged into the Family Foundation's portal. I still had my credentials. I was the bookkeeper after all. Sarah had cut my credit cards, but she hadn't thought to revoke my admin access to the accounting software. She was lazy with details. She probably thought firing me was enough. I looked at the logs. There were pending transactions. Huge ones. Deposit, Elite Exotics dealership $50,000. Retainer, Lux Renovations $100,000. Transfer to personal account Hunter Blackwell, $25,000. She was draining the operating cash of the foundation to fund her personal celebration. This was illegal. This was embezzlement. She's insane, I whispered. What? Liam looked over my shoulder. She's using charity money to buy a Porsche, I said. She thinks because she's the beneficiary, it's all one big pot of gold. She doesn't understand the difference between the trust, the foundation, and the estate. This was it. This was the crack in her armor. But I couldn't just call the police. That would drag the family name through the mud. Dad worked 80 years to build that name. I wasn't going to let Sarah's stupidity destroy his legacy in the tabloids. I needed to stop her legally. I needed to bind her hands. I went back to the binder. The will. The real will. I turned to page 42 again. The text I had skimmed in the car. Clause 18. The appointment of executor. I read it out loud. While my daughter, Sarah Reynolds, is the primary beneficiary of the life estate and income derived from the family trust, the administration, disbursement, and oversight of all assets, including the foundation and the trust corpus, shall be the sole responsibility of the appointed executor. I scanned down to the bottom of the page. I hereby appoint my son, Joshua Reynolds, as the sole executor and trustee, with full discretion over distributions based on the beneficiary's adherence to the code of conduct. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of Liam's refrigerator. Whoa, Liam said. Translate that into English for me. I looked up, a slow smile spreading across my face. It was the first time I had smiled in days. It means, I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. She owns the house, but she can't sell it. She gets the money, but only if I sign the check. And she can't fire me. You're the boss? Liam asked. I'm the bank, I corrected. I'm the gatekeeper. She has the title of queen, but I control the treasury. Does she know? No, I said, remembering the summary reading. Robert had only read the beneficiary part. He hadn't gotten to the administration part because Sarah had interrupted him to ask about the house keys. She never let him finish. She didn't read the will. She just heard 28 million foot and stopped listening. I closed the binder. The feeling of helplessness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard determination. She wants to play games? I said, standing up. She wants to treat me like an employee? Fine. Then I'm going to be the strictest boss she's ever had. I grabbed my phone. I dialed Robert, the lawyer. Robert? It's Joshua. I've been expecting your call, son. Robert's voice was warm, gravelly. I heard about last night. I'm sorry. Don't be, I said. I need to set up a meeting. This Friday. At the house. All parties present. You want to do the formal reading? Robert asked. I could hear the smile in his voice. Yes, I said. And Robert? Bring the long version. The one with the fine print. With pleasure. I hung up. I turned to Liam. Do you have a suit I can borrow? Mine is in the box, and it smells like car exhaust. I have a suit, Liam grinned. It might be a little tight in the shoulders, but you'll look like a hitman, which I guess is exactly what you are right now. I wasn't a hitman. I was a brother. But sometimes, being a good brother means letting your sister hit a wall so she can finally learn to stand up. Sarah had ordered a Porsche. She had given her boyfriend 25 grand of charity money. She had kicked me out into the cold. She had no idea that on Friday, she was going to crash. Hard. The days between Tuesday and Friday were a blur of preparation. I didn't sleep much. I spent the time at Liam's kitchen table building my case. I wasn't just going to walk into that meeting and wave a paper around. I needed ammunition. I printed out the transaction logs from the foundation. I printed out the text messages from Elena. Sorry, Elena, but you were collateral damage now. I pulled the property records for the house. I felt like a detective piecing together a crime that was still in progress. On Thursday night, I met Robert at a diner halfway between the city and the estate. He looked out of place in the greasy spoon, wearing his three-piece suit, but he ate his burger with gusto. She's moving fast, Joshua, Robert said, wiping ketchup from his lip. She called my office 3 times today screaming about the trust access. She wants to know why the black card isn't working for the Porsche down payment. What did you tell her? I asked, sipping my black coffee. I told her that due to the transition of the estate, there are administrative delays. Robert winked. I told her the executor needs to sign off on any transfer over $10,000. And did she ask who the executor is? She assumes it's me, Robert chuckled. She called me an incompetent old bat and threatened to fire me. She can't fire you, I noted. No, only you can. Robert reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. This is the kicker, Josh. Your father added this 6 months ago, after the incident where Sarah missed your mother's birthday to go to Coachella. I looked at the document. It was a code of conduct and morality clause. The beneficiary shall maintain the dignity of the family name. Any action deemed by the trustee, executor, to be abusive, neglectful, or harmful to family members or dependents shall result in a suspension of discretionary funds. Specifically, the displacement of any dependent residing in the family home for more than 12 months requires a unanimous vote of the board. My jaw dropped. Displacement of any dependent. You lived there for 3 years, Josh, Robert said softly. You are a dependent resident under the terms of this trust. She didn't just be mean to you. She violated the core condition of her inheritance. She broke the law of the will before the ink was even dry, I realized. Exactly, which gives you the leverage. You don't just control the money. You have the right to evict her if you wanted to. Technically, by kicking you out, she forfeited her life estate rights. I sat back. The power of it was dizzying. I could kick her out. I could tell her to find somewhere else to die. I could crush her. Do you want to do that? Robert asked, watching me closely. Do you want to take it all? I thought about it. I thought about the cold porch. The useless comment. No, I said. I don't want to be her. I don't want revenge, Robert. I want justice. And I want her to grow up. If I kick her out, she becomes the victim. She spins a story about how her evil brother stole her inheritance. I want her to stay, but I want her to understand that she is a guest in my world now. Robert smiled. Your father was right about you. You play the long game. Friday morning arrived. I put on Liam's suit. It was a little tight, but it made me look broad-shouldered. I shaved. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look like the tired caregiver anymore. I looked like a CEO. I drove my battered Toyota to the estate. I arrived at 9:55 a.m. There was a brand new Range Rover in the driveway. Hunter's car. Bought with whose money? I wondered. I walked up the steps. I didn't knock. I had my key. I unlocked the door. The house was a mess. There were boxes everywhere. Sarah was already redecorating. The smell of lemon polish was gone, replaced by some expensive, cloying perfume. Sarah was in the living room, lounging on the sofa. Hunter was there too, wearing a bathrobe, my dad's bathrobe, and eating cereal out of a mixing bowl. They looked up when I walked in. "Excuse me?" Sarah stood up, her face flushing with anger. "How did you get in here? I thought I told you to get lost." "I have a meeting," I said calmly, placing my briefcase on the coffee table. I looked at Hunter. "Nice robe. Take it off." "Whoa, relax, sport," Hunter smirked. "Sarah, call the cops. He's trespassing." "I'm not trespassing," I said. "I'm early." Just then, the doorbell rang. Robert walked in, flanked by two paralegals carrying stacks of files. "Good morning, everyone," Robert boomed. "Robert!" Sarah rushed to him. "Thank God. Tell my brother to leave. He's delusional. And why haven't you released the funds for my car yet? Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a card declined?" "We are here to discuss exactly that," Robert said. "Please sit down." "Sarah." "Hunter." "I'm not sitting until he leaves." Sarah pointed at me. "Actually," Robert said, his voice dropping an octave, "he is the only person who absolutely has to be here. If he leaves, this meeting and your bank access ends immediately." Sarah froze. She looked from Robert to me, then back to Robert. Her brain was trying to process the information, but it wasn't clicking. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "I'm the beneficiary." "Sit down, Sarah," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. It was the voice I used when I had to tell Dad it was time for his medicine. It was a voice of authority. She sat. She looked small suddenly. "Robert." I nodded. "Read it." Robert opened the main file. The sound of the paper crinkling was deafening in the silent room. "As per the last will and testament of Arthur and Grace Reynolds," Robert began, "we are here to formalize the administrative structure of the estate." "Skip the boring parts," Sarah waved her hand. "Just tell me when I get the money." "You don't," Robert said. Sarah blinked. "Excuse me?" "You don't get the money, Sarah." Robert looked her dead in the eye. "You get an allowance, a stipend, subject to approval." "Approval by who?" she shrieked. "You." "No." Robert pointed a pen across the table, pointed it straight at me. "By him." Sarah turned her head slowly to look at me. Her face went pale, a sickly, ghostly white. "What?" she whispered. "Allow me to read Clause 18, Robert continued, enjoying this way too much. "I appoint my son, Joshua Reynolds, as sole executor and trustee, full discretion over all assets, power to hire and fire foundation staff, power to manage the real estate." "That's a lie." Sarah stood up, knocking over her wine glass. Red wine spilled onto the white carpet. "Daddy wouldn't do that. He said I was the heir." "You are the beneficiary," I said, speaking for the first time. "You get the benefit. I get the burden. That's how Dad saw it. He knew you liked to spend. He knew I knew how to save." "I'll sue," she hissed. "I'll contest the will. I'll drag you to court." "You could," Robert interjected. "But then we would have to bring up the morality clause." "The what?" Hunter asked, looking nervous. "Clause 22, I said. I didn't need the paper. I had memorized it. Any beneficiary who displaces a dependent family member from the ancestral home forfeits their right to residency. I leaned forward. "You kicked me out on Tuesday, Sarah. You told me to find somewhere else to die. Under the terms of this will, that action alone gives me the legal right to evict you immediately and cut off your funding permanently." The silence that followed was heavy, heavier than the door she had slammed in my face. Sarah looked at Hunter for support. Hunter was looking at his phone, probably checking if his Uber app was working. You wouldn't," Sarah stammered. Her eyes were filling with tears. "I'm your sister." "Funny," I said. "I wasn't your brother on Tuesday night. I was just useless." I stood up. "But I'm not you, Sarah. I'm not going to kick you out." Her shoulders slumped in relief. "However," I continued. Things are going to change. Drastically. The air in the room had shifted. 5 minutes ago, Sarah was the queen of the castle. Now, she was a terrified tenant facing the landlord. I walked around the table. I felt a surge of power, but I tamped it down. Anger makes you sloppy. I needed to be surgical. Here is the new reality, I said, dropping a folder in front of her. Item 1, the foundation. You are currently the president. Effective immediately, you are removed from that position. You can't do that, Sarah cried. That's my image. The gala is next month. Not anymore, I said. I've reviewed the logs, Sarah. You used foundation funds to put a deposit on a Porsche and pay Hunters. What was it? Consulting fees. I looked at Hunter. He shrank into the sofa. That's embezzlement, Robert added helpfully. Joshua could report it to the IRS. You'd go to prison. Instead, he's allowing you to resign for personal health reasons. Sarah stared at the resignation letter. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. Item 2, I continued. The house. You can stay here, but Hunter cannot. Hey, Hunter protested. I live here. No, I said. You've been here for 2 days. You're a guest. And as the trustee, I'm revoking your guest privileges. You have 1 hour to pack your bags and get out. Sarah, Hunter pleaded. Tell him. Sarah looked at me, then at Hunter. She was doing the math. She realized that if she fought me on Hunter, she lost everything. The money, the house, the reputation. She looked down at her lap. Hunter, maybe you should go. Are you kidding me? Hunter stood up. You're letting him boss you around? You have $28 million. She has nothing. I snapped. My voice cracked like a whip. She has a stipend of $5,000 a month for living expenses. The rest is in the trust. And not a penny goes to you. Hunter looked at Sarah with disgust. You said you were rich. You said you were in charge. I was. Sarah sobbed. I'm out of here, Hunter said. He didn't even pack. He just walked out the front door. He didn't look back. Sarah watched him go. The realization hit her. He wasn't there for her. He was there for the lifestyle. He left, she whispered. He was a parasite, Sarah, I said gently. I just fumigated the house. Item 3, I said, pressing on. The car. The Porsche order is canceled. The deposit is being returned to the foundation. But I need a car, she wailed. People will see me driving my old Mercedes. It's 3 years old. It's a tragedy, I know, I said sarcastically. But you'll survive. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was broken. The arrogance was gone. Peeled away layer by layer until all that was left was a scared little girl who missed her parents but didn't know how to grieve without shopping. Why are you doing this? She asked, tears streaming down her face. Do you hate me? No, I said. I'm doing this because Dad asked me to. He knew you'd blow through the money in a year. He knew you'd end up with nothing. I'm not destroying your life, Sarah. I'm saving it. I'm the safeguard. Remember. She buried her face in her hands. Sign the resignation, I said. She picked up the pen. She signed. Good, I said. Now I'm moving back in. Not to the guest room. I'm taking the east wing. The library stays. Dad's books stay. She nodded mutely. And Sarah? She looked up. Clean up this wine. I pointed to the spill on the carpet. The maid service is cut back to twice a week. You need to learn how to use a towel. I turned to Robert. We're done here. Robert stood up, closed his briefcase, and gave me a look of pure respect. I'll file these immediately. I walked out of the living room, leaving Sarah sitting amidst the ruins of her ego. I walked out onto the porch, the same porch where she had kicked me out 3 days ago. The air was still cold, but it felt different now. It felt crisp, clean. This is the moment that changed everything. When I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for being patient with me this far. You guys are amazing. Please help me by liking this video and commenting 1 below. So I know you've been with me on this journey. It not only helps more people find this story, but it lets me know that my experience means something to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to share the rest of this journey. The aftermath was surgical. I didn't want to humiliate Sarah publicly, but I had to dismantle the false reality she had built. First came the accounts. I spent the next week freezing everything. I sat in Dad's study, my study now, and made the calls. Yes, this is Joshua Reynolds, executor. Cancel the Platinum Amex. Yes. Lower the limit on the secondary card to $2,000. I could hear Sarah pacing in the hallway outside the door. She was like a ghost in her own house. Every time the phone rang, she flinched. The biggest blow came when the charity gala organizers called. Mr. Reynolds, the organizer said, sounding confused. We received a letter of resignation from Sarah? Is this true? She's the face of the event. Sarah has decided to take a sabbatical to focus on family healing. I lied smoothly. I will be stepping in as interim chair. And regarding the donation pledge Sarah made, we will be honoring it, but it will be directed towards the local homeless shelter, not the opera house. Oh, the organizer said. I see. Well, that's very noble. It wasn't noble. It was practical. Dad hated the opera. He loved the shelter. I was just putting things back to where they belonged. Sarah didn't leave her room for 3 days. She claimed she was sick. I knew she was hiding. She was waiting for the world to find out she was a fraud. On Wednesday, I knocked on her door. Go away, she mumbled. Dinner is ready, I said. I'm not hungry. It's meatloaf, I said. Mom's recipe. Silence. Then the door creaked open. She looked terrible. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, wearing sweatpants. It was the first time in years she looked like a human being. She came downstairs. We sat at the long dining table. Just the two of us. The empty chairs of our parents felt like they were occupied by ghosts. We ate in silence for a while. Hunter blocked me, she said suddenly. I didn't look up from my plate. I'm not surprised. He said I deceived him. He said I trapped him. He's a con artist, Sarah. He was projecting. She poked at her meatloaf. What am I supposed to do now, Josh? I don't have a job. I don't have a boyfriend. I don't have money. You have a house, I said. You have food. You have $5,000 a month, which is more than most people make working full-time. And you have a brother who didn't kick you out when he had the chance. She looked at me. Her eyes welled up. I'm sorry, she whispered. About what I said. About you being useless. I know, I said. But words have consequences, Sarah. You can't just say sorry and fix the vase you broke. So what do I do? You get a job, I said. She laughed. A nervous sound. Me? Doing what? Elena tells me the art gallery in town is looking for a receptionist. You know art. You know people. A receptionist? She looked horrified. I'm a Reynolds. You're a Reynolds who needs to learn the value of $1, I said. I spoke to the owner. The job is yours if you show up tomorrow at 9 a.m. If you don't, well, the stipend might get reviewed. It was a bluff mostly, but she didn't know that. The next morning, I watched from the window as Sarah walked out to her 3-year-old Mercedes. She was wearing a sensible skirt and blouse. She looked nervous. She got in the car and drove away. To a job. A real job. I walked into the kitchen. I poured myself a cup of coffee. I looked at the calendar. It had been exactly 1 week since the funeral. 1 week since my life fell apart and then came back together in a shape I never expected. The phone rang. It was Liam. Hey, boss man, Liam joked. How's the empire? It's standing, I said. Just barely. You want to come over for pizza? I promise no one will kick you out. I'd love to, I said. I grabbed my keys. As I walked out the door, I paused on the porch. The same spot where I had stood with my cardboard box. The fear was gone. The anger was fading. What was left was a sense of duty. Dad was right. I was the safeguard. And for the first time, I realized that I wasn't just guarding the money. I was guarding Sarah from herself. And maybe, just maybe, I was saving us both. 6 months. That is approximately 180 days. It doesn't seem like a long time in the grand scheme of history, but inside the Reynolds estate it was an eternity. It was the time it took to dismantle a lifetime of entitlement and rebuild it into something resembling character. The house was quiet now. The constant stream of caterers, florists, and friends who only drank our wine had dried up. The east wing, my domain, was filled with the soft scratching of my pen on paper and the hum of the server where I kept the foundation's digital life. Sarah was still living in the house, but it was a different Sarah. The first month was hell. Let's be honest. She didn't walk into her new life with grace. She dragged her feet. She complained about the humiliation of working at an art gallery reception desk. She came home every night with swollen feet and a bruised ego, throwing her purse on the sofa and glaring at me as if I were the warden of a prison she had built for herself. I had to fetch coffee for a 22-year-old influencer today, she told me one Tuesday night, stabbing at her salad. She didn't even say thank you. She just pointed at the coaster. Welcome to the service industry, I said, not looking up from my tablet. Did you put the coaster down? I wanted to throw the latte in her face, Sarah admitted. But you didn't, I noted. No, I need the paycheck. My car insurance is due. I paused. That sentence. My car insurance is due. 6 weeks ago, Sarah didn't even know what car insurance cost. She thought it was just a magic bill that vanished into the estate's accounts. Now she was budgeting for it. Good, I said. That shows restraint. The turning point didn't come with a bang. Came with a whisper. It happened around month 3. I was dealing with a crisis at the foundation. One of our biggest donors, Mr. Sterling, the man Sarah used to charm effortlessly, was threatening to pull his funding. He had heard rumors about the instability in the family. He was old school. He didn't like drama. I invited him to the house for tea. I was nervous. I knew numbers, I knew strategy, but I didn't have Sarah's gift for schmoozing. I didn't know how to make a billionaire feel like a rock star. Mr. Sterling sat in Dad's favorite chair, looking skeptical. Joshua, he said, swirling his Earl Grey. I respected your father. He was a shark. But this situation with your sister, the abrupt resignation, the rumors of financial cutbacks, it looks messy. I don't invest in messy. We are restructuring, sir, I said, trying to sound confident. We are pivoting from gala-heavy fundraising to direct impact projects. Less champagne, more shelters. Noble, Sterling grunted, but boring. Donors want to feel special. They want the sizzle. Sarah was the sizzle. I felt a bead of sweat roll down my back. He was right. I was the steak. Nutritious, necessary, but not exciting. I was losing him. Just then, the front door opened. Sarah walked in. She had just come from work. She was wearing her gallery uniform, a simple black dress, sensible shoes. Her hair was tied back. She looked tired. She stopped when she saw us. Mr. Sterling, she said. Her voice wasn't the high-pitched, fake excitement she used to use. It was lower, calmer. Sarah, Sterling nodded, looking her up and down. I heard you're working. I am, she said. She walked over not to hug him, but to shake his hand. Her grip was firm. I'm the front desk manager at the gallery on Main. It's not the Met, but it pays the bills. Sterling raised an eyebrow. Pays the bills? I thought the Reynolds Trust took care of that. Sarah looked at me. For a second, I thought she was going to crack. I thought she was going to beg him to save her, to tell him her evil brother had cut her off. Instead, she smiled. A real smile. One that didn't reach her eyes in a flashy way, but settled in the corners of her mouth. The trust takes care of the legacy, Mr. Sterling, she said. I'm learning to take care of myself. Turns out I wasn't very good at it before. My brother is teaching me. Sterling looked at her. He looked at her simple dress, her tired eyes, and the lack of jewelry. And how is the lesson going? He asked. It's hard, Sarah admitted frankly. But I know the value of $1 now. Which is why I know that the proposal Joshua is showing you, the one about the youth centers, is the best use of your money. We used to spend $50,000 on flowers for the spring party. That's 2 years of counseling for 50 kids. I'd rather buy the counseling. The room went silent. I stared at her. Who was this woman? Mr. Sterling set his cup down. He looked at me, then back at Sarah. 2 years of counseling, he repeated. Yes, Sarah said. I did the math. Joshua showed me the spreadsheets. Sterling laughed. A deep, belly laugh. Well, he said, I'll be damned. The sizzle got smart. He turned to me. You keep the money, Joshua. In fact, double my contribution. If you can turn this 1 inch, he pointed at Sarah, into a pragmatist, you can certainly fix the city. When Sterling left, I closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a long breath. Sarah was already halfway up the stairs. Sarah, I called out. She stopped. Thank you, I said. She shrugged, not turning around. He was right, Josh. The flowers were a waste of money. I just never looked at the invoices before. That night, I went into the attic. There was one box I hadn't opened yet. It was a box labeled "In case of emergency," in Mom's handwriting. I thought it contained medical records or safe combinations. But when I opened it, I found envelopes. Letters. One for me. One for Sarah. I opened mine. My dearest Joshua, if you are reading this, the silence has finally broken. You were always the strong one, even when you thought you were weak. Watch over her. She shines bright, but she burns fast. Be the hearth, not the fire extinguisher. Love, Mom. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Be the hearth. I had been acting like the fire extinguisher, putting out her fires, controlling her chaos. But a hearth provides warmth. A hearth is a gathering place. I picked up Sarah's letter. It was sealed. I walked down to her room. She was sitting on her bed, counting cash from her tips jar. It was a humble sight. Here, I said, handing her the envelope. What's this? Mom left it. For when things got real. Sarah took the envelope. Her hands started to shake. She tore it open. I watched her read. I saw her eyes widen. Then I saw the tears. Not the performative tears from the funeral. These were ugly, silent tears that shook her whole frame. She dropped the letter on the bed. I didn't mean to read it, but the handwriting was large. Sarah, my beautiful star. Someday the applause will stop. Someday the money won't fix the hurt. When that day comes, look at your brother. He isn't your shadow. He is your anchor. Don't cut the rope, or you will drift away. I love you, even when you are lost. Sarah looked up at me. Her mascara was running. She knew, Sarah whispered. She knew I would mess it up. She knew you were lost, I corrected. There's a difference. Sarah stood up and walked over to me. For the first time in 20 years, she hugged me. It wasn't a side hug. It was a desperate cling. She buried her face in my shoulder and sobbed. I'm sorry, Josh, she choked out. I was so awful. I was so scared that without the money, I was nothing. And when you took it away, I hated you because I thought you were confirming it. You're not nothing, I said, patting her back awkwardly. You're Sarah. You're the one who used to chase away the monsters. I became the monster, she said. And now you're human again, I said. I prefer the human. We stood there for a long time. The house felt different. The ghosts of our parents weren't judging us anymore. They were nodding. The next few months were a steady climb. Sarah didn't get her presidency back. I wasn't going to hand her the keys just because she cried. Trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets. She had to fill the bucket back up. She kept her job at the gallery. She started volunteering at the shelter, not as a board member, but serving soup. I watched her from a distance. I saw her talking to people, really talking to them, not just smiling for a photo op. She had empathy. It had just been buried under layers of Gucci and indifference. I loosened the reins a little. I increased her stipend, not enough for a Porsche, but enough for a decent life. I unlocked the guest rooms. I told her she could have friends over, as long as they weren't Hunter. Speaking of Hunter, he tried to come back. Of course he did. About 4 months in, he showed up at the door with flowers. He had heard Sarah was rehabilitated, and probably assumed the money tap was back on. I didn't even have to get up from my desk. Sarah answered the door. I listened from the hallway. "Babe, I made a mistake." Hunter's voice was smooth like oil. I panicked. "I missed you." "You missed the lifestyle, Hunter," Sarah said. Her voice was steel. "No, I missed you. Come on. Let's go to dinner. My treat." "Your treat," Sarah laughed. "With what money? The money you borrowed from me? Don't be like that. Look, I know your brother is a tyrant." "My brother," Sarah interrupted, "is the only reason I'm not sleeping in my car right now. And if you ever call him a tyrant again, I will call the police." "Sarah." "Goodbye, Hunter. Find somewhere else to feed." She slammed the door. I smiled. Find somewhere else to feed. It was a nice echo of her old cruelty, but directed at the right target this time. She walked into my study, tossed the flowers in the trash bin, and sat down. "That felt good," she said. "Chess move," I said. "You sacrificed a pawn to save the queen." "I'm not the queen, Josh," she said softly. "I'm just a player on the board now." "That's all any of us are," I said. By the time the 1-year anniversary of our parents' death approached, the estate was unrecognizable. The debt was cleared, the foundation was thriving, and Sarah Reynolds was driving a Honda Civic and paying for her own gas. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We still fought. She still rolled her eyes when I talked about tax codes. I still got annoyed when she left her shoes in the hallway. But we were family again. And then came the final test. The reading of the conditional release. Dad had put a clause in the will that I had kept secret, even from Sarah. It stated that if the beneficiary could prove financial competency and moral rectitude for a period of 1 year, the executor could vote to release a portion of the trust's principal directly to them. It was a test for me too. Could I let go of the control? I called a meeting. Friday morning. The same table. The same lawyer. Robert looked at me. He knew what was coming. Sarah sat down. She looked nervous. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "I paid the utility bill. I have the receipt." "Nothing is wrong," I said. "This is a review." I pushed a document toward her. "This is a release form," I said. "It authorizes the transfer of $2 million from the trust directly to your personal account. No oversight. No restrictions. You can buy a Porsche. You can go to Bali. You can do whatever you want." Sarah stared at the paper. She looked at the number. $2 million. The old Sarah would have snatched it before I finished the sentence. The new Sarah stared at it. She reached out and touched the paper. Then she pulled her hand back. "Why?" she asked. "Because you passed," I said. "You stayed. You worked. You learned. Dad wanted you to have this if you could handle it." Sarah looked at the paper for a long minute. The clock on the wall ticked. Then she picked up the pen. I held my breath. Was she going to revert? Was the money going to trigger the relapse? She wrote something on the paper, but she didn't sign the bottom line. She wrote a note in the margin. She slid it back to me. I looked at it. She had written, "Invest it in the shelter project. I have enough." I looked up at her. My vision blurred. "Sarah," I choked out, "this is $2 million. "I know," she said, "but I don't need it, Josh. I have my salary. I have the stipend. I'm okay. But the shelter needs a new wing. Dad would want that." She stood up. "Besides," she smiled, a mischievous glint in her eye, "if I buy a Porsche, where would I put my gallery supplies? The trunk is tiny." She walked out of the room. Robert closed his binder. He took off his glasses and wiped his eyes. "Your father was a genius," Robert said. "No," I said, looking at the door where my sister had just exited. "He was a gardener. He knew that sometimes you have to cut a plant back to the roots to make it bloom." The cemetery was quiet. It usually is on a Tuesday morning. The grass was wet with dew, and the fog was clinging to the tombstones like a soft blanket. I stood in front of the double headstone. Arthur and Grace Reynolds. Beloved parents. Builders of legacy. I placed 2 chess pieces on the granite. The white king for Dad. The white queen for Mom. It was our tradition now. Every Sunday I came here. But today was special. Today was the day I officially stepped down as the sole dictator of the Reynolds estate and welcomed my co-pilot. I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. I didn't turn around. I knew the footsteps. You're early, Sarah said. I like the quiet, I replied. She stepped up beside me. She was wearing a trench coat and holding a bouquet of wild lilies. Not the expensive, imported roses she used to order. Just simple, resilient flowers. She placed them between the chess pieces. They look peaceful, she said. They are, I said. Finally, we stood there for a moment, listening to the wind in the trees. I handed in my notice at the gallery today, Sarah said. I looked at her. Oh, yeah. The owner said I was overqualified. Said I should be running my own ship. And what ship is that? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. I want to come back to the foundation, Josh, she said. She turned to face me. Not as the president. Not as the face. I want to work in operations. I want to manage the shelter project. I want to be on the ground, making sure the concrete gets poured and the beds get delivered. I smiled. That's a lot of paperwork. It's not glamorous. I don't need glamour, she said. I need purpose. And I think we make a good team. You handle the money. I handle the people. But this time, I actually listened to the people. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key. It wasn't a key to a car or a house. It was the key to the foundation's main office, the one Dad used to have. I've been keeping this for you, I said. Welcome back, partner. She took the key. She squeezed it in her hand. Thank you, brother, she said. And the way she said brother, it had weight. It had respect. We walked back to the car together. My old Camry was gone, replaced by a sensible SUV that we shared. The Porsche was never bought. The East Wing was never demolished. As I drove us home to our home, I thought about the journey. I thought about the night I slept in the Walmart parking lot. I thought about the anger that had fueled me, the cold desire to crush her. But anger is a cheap fuel. It burns hot and fast, but it destroys the engine. Duty is the real fuel. Duty and love. I had won the game, yes. I had checkmated her. But the beauty of chess is that when the game is over, you reset the board. You don't throw the pieces away. You set them up again for a new game. We pulled into the driveway. The house looked different now. It wasn't a fortress of wealth anymore. There were tricycles on the lawn Liam's kids were visiting. There was a vegetable garden in the back that Sarah had started planting. It looked lived in. It looked messy. It looked perfect. Sarah got out of the car. She paused and looked at the porch, the spot where she had kicked me out. She looked at me. I'm glad you didn't die, she said. A small, wry smile on her face. Me too, I said. I'm glad you didn't stay useless. We laughed. It was a shared joke now, a scar that had healed over. I walked up the steps. Sarah held the door open for me. After you, she said. I walked inside. The smell of lemon polish was back, mixed with the smell of dinner cooking in the slow cooker. I was home. I went into my study and sat at my desk. I opened the ledger, the same ledger Dad had taught me on. The numbers were balanced. The assets were secure. But the biggest asset wasn't on the spreadsheet. The biggest asset was the woman in the kitchen, chopping carrots and humming a song Mom used to sing. The biggest asset was the forgiveness that had turned a war zone back into a family. I closed the book. I looked at the camera, or rather at you, the people who have been listening to this story. You know, people think inheritance is about money. They think it's about who gets the house, who gets the stocks, who gets the jewelry. But that's just stuff. Stuff rots. Stuff gets spent. The real inheritance is the values you leave behind. Dad left us a test. He left us a puzzle that we could only solve if we stopped fighting and started listening. He knew Sarah needed to fall to learn how to stand. He knew I needed to lead to learn how to love. It took a slamming door, a frozen bank account, and a long, hard winter to get here. But we made it. So, if you're fighting with your family over things that don't matter, stop. Look at the chessboard. Ask yourself, are you trying to win the game, or are you trying to save the players? Because you can win the game and still be alone. And that, my friends, is a checkmate nobody wants. This is Joshua Reynolds signing off. The books are closed. The board is reset. And for the first time in a long time, the king and the queen are on the same side. This story wasn't just about a sister who got greedy or a brother who got revenge. It was about the toxic illusion that wealth equals worth. Sarah believed that because she had the $28 million, she was a superior human being. She confused her net worth with her self-worth. It took losing the money for her to find her humanity. On the flip side, it was a lesson about the safeguard. Sometimes, loving someone doesn't mean giving them what they want. It means giving them what they need, even if they hate you for it. I had to be the villain in Sarah's story for a while, so she could eventually become the hero of her own. True leadership isn't about power. It's about responsibility. It's about being the one who holds the line when everyone else is losing their way. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to practice tough love with a family member? Or have you ever been the one who needed a wake-up call? Drop a good in the comments if you believe that character is more valuable than currency. Or share your own story of family redemption. Your comments help keep this channel alive and remind us all that we're not alone in these struggles. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.